What's up everybody, welcome back. So in the last episode we added the drop down menu for our items, and in this episode we're going to make sure that the buttons in there actually work so we can drop and split stacks. And we're also going to add a take all button to the containers so that we can take all of the items at once if we want to. So if you like the project, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the YouTube channel, and then you will get access to the premium channels in the Discord to download the project files. So with that stuff out of the way, let's dive into the video. The first thing we want to do is make sure that our remove item functions actually use amounts. So right now, if we remove an item, it actually just removes the entire stack, and we cannot say how many items we want to remove. So that's what we're going to change first. So let's open up our third person character, and in there on the event graph, we want to look at the remove item from inventory functions. So we have server remove item from inventory over here that calls the normal function. For this one, we want to get rid of the drop into world boolean. We're not using that anymore. We're actually dropping items by dragging them. So let's get rid of it for the event over here. And then we're going to go into the function and we can get rid of the input over here as well. And then obviously, because we remove the input, we can get rid of this branch over here. So that's the branch for drop into world. So let's just delete that. And we can remove the entire upper branch over here. So that should be good to go. Now let's start rebuilding the function. So first we're going to check if the player inventory is not empty. That's fine. Then we want to set a new local amount variable. So we're going to create a new variable, and that's the local new amount. And that's an integer. And now that we're in here, we can also get rid of the drop location. We're not using that anymore, so let's just delete that one. We want to set the new amount over here if the player inventory is not empty. And then we can simply right click and get the player inventory. And from the player inventory, we want to get an index. So we're going to get a copy, and then we're going to get it from the inventory index. So plug it into the input. And from here we can break this, and we want to do the same thing for the actual item to remove. So that's the item info from the event input. We're going to get a copy from here as well, and we're simply going to get the first index because we can actually only remove one item at a time. So then we can break that one as well, and we can subtract the amounts. So let's subtract the item info amount from the player inventory, and then we can store that inside of the new local amount variable. So we need to check if this is 0 or not. So let's do smaller than 0, smaller than or equal to, I'm sorry. And then we're going to plug that into the condition. So if this is true, then we are actually setting the slot to empty. So we can grab all of the previous stuff and let's drag it over. So that is what we were doing before. So there we go. So we can actually just grab this set array element, plug it into the true pin, and that's for the empty setter. So the new amount is 0, that makes sense. And then for the lower branch, we also want to set an array element, plug it into the false pin. And in this case, we're going to use the inventory index again. So let's drag that from the input. That's the same pin over here. And for the item, we need to make it. And we're going to get the row name from one of the breakers over here. Doesn't matter which one you grab. Those should be the same. And we can just plug in our new amount variable in here. And then continue like we used to. So that should work. Now we can actually define an amount to remove. With that setup, we need to do the same thing in the game mode because we also have a remove item from container function. So let's just open up our game mode. And we're going to go to remove item from container. So let's clean this up a little bit. Remove item from container, so over here. So we're setting the container world index and make sure that we actually have this container found. So that's good. We're going to keep this stuff and move it over. And then again, we want to set a new local variable, and that's the local new amount. So let's make that one. And that's an integer again. And we can set it first. So let's look in the true bin over here. And and we can do the same thing like we did in the previous function. So we can grab the container from here, and we're going to get the container contents. And from the container contents, we want to get a copy, and we can use the index from the function input. And then we want to get the contents from the input again. So we can just drag over here, why not? And over here, we also want to get a copy. And in this case, we want to get the first index. So that's good. Now we can break these and subtract the amounts again. So subtract and subtract the contents from it. And then we're going to store that in the new amount variable. And again, we need to make sure that this is smaller than or equal to 0. So we're going to grab a branch is less than or equal to, plug this in. So if this is true, we're going to use our empty setter again. So set array element and make an empty slot. And if this is false, then we want to grab all of this stuff, paste it over here. So the inventory index, we can grab that from the event again. And then we're going to plug in the new amount and make sure that we grab the item name from here. So that should work. And then we want to continue to make sure that we actually save and update everything. So that's the remove item from container function. So let's save this, and that's good to go as well. So now we can start setting up the actual drop and split buttons in the item menu. Let's start in our player inventory widget. So open up your widget blueprint player inventory. And first we want to go into our setup inventory grid function. And we want to make a small change over here at the end. So right before the return node, let's just disconnect it for now. So we're going to grab our item inventory and we're going to check if this is valid. Plug it in over here. And if this is valid, so if we actually made a change to our inventory and we have an item menu open, then we might want to update the split stack values. So what we want to do over here is grab our item menu again, and we want to get the isWorldItem boolean. So over here, we're updating either the player inventory or the world inventory. So depending on that, we actually need to check if we are changing one of those. So we can plug this one into a branch as well. And if the item menu is valid, we're going to check the boolean. And if the boolean is not an item, world item, sorry, and we are in the player menu because this is the top branch, then we want to update the split stack. So then we're going to drag off the inventory item menu and call our update split stack function. So this one goes into the false bin of this boolean. And then from there we can return. And if this one is true, we can return. And if the item menu is not valid, we can also just return. So this is the part for the player inventory update. And then we also want to grab this stuff and paste it over here. So in this case, we're changing the world inventory or a container. And if this item is a world item, so in this case, if it's true, we also want to update the split stack. So we can just plug it in over here, by the way. And if this is false, we can return. And if it's not valid, we're also going to return. So this is a nice piece of spaghetti, but this is how it should be. So let's compile and save it. And then we're going to go into our event graph and we're going to create a function for the dropping and splitting items. So let's do drop item first. Let's create a new custom event and call this drop item from menu. So in here we need a few inputs. Let's just add those first. So we're going to add the item row name. And that's a name variable. Then we want the item info, and that's an array of our inventory content structure. So item info, and then our inventory contents. And make sure this is an array. Nope. And then we also need the inventory index, and we also need a boolean for the container. So let's add the inventory index, and that's an integer. So that's a single variable again. And the last one is from container, and that's a boolean. So first we're going to check if this is an item that comes from a container or from a player inventory. And then we can grab our third person character over here. So if this is true, then it's a container item. So we need to call server RemoveItem from container. Plug this one into the true bin and make sure that you plug in the contents and the index. And if this is a player item, then we're going to call RemoveItem from inventory. So server RemoveItem from inventory. Nope. And again, we want to plug in the inputs. And after that, we also want to throw the item. So again, we're going to drag off the third person character and we're going to call server throw item. So we drop them into the world. So we actually need to make sure we're dropping them. And then we can pass on the item row name, the boolean, and the contents. And that should be good to go. Now all we need to do is go into our inventory item menu and create the function in there. So let's open our inventory item menu and let's go to the graph. And in here we're going to add an onClicked for the drop button. So button drop, create onClicked. And then we can simply grab our player inventory and call the event we just created. So that's drop item from menu. And make sure that we grab all the variables over here. So first of all, we can grab the item row name and simply plug it in. So for the item info, we need to make an array. And from the array, we can make an inventory content structure. So we can grab the item row name over here again. And then we're going to grab the amount from the input amount. So that's the input box. So from here, we actually want to get the text that's inside of the box. So we're going to get text. And this returns a name, and we need it to be an integer, but we can't do that from a name. So first we need to go to a string. And from a string, we can actually go to an integer, and then we are good to go. No, we are not good to go because we have a few variables left and we can actually grab those from the inventory slot. So grab your inventory slot over here, and from there we can get the inventory index, and we can also get the boolean that tells us if it's a world item or a player item. So is world item. Plug it in and plug that one in as well. So this should make the drop button work. If we click the drop button, it will call the event on the player inventory, and that will call the correct replicated event on the character. So now we need to do a similar thing for the split items. So let's go back into our player inventory. There we go. And in here, we're going to create a new custom event, and this one is for the splitting items. So let's call it a split item stack. And let's give it the inputs that we need first. So the first one is going to be the new stack contents. So that's an array of our inventory content structure. Nope. And that's an array. And then we need the inventory index again and the boolean that tells us if it's a container item. So let's make the inventory index. And it's an integer as a single variable. And the last one is from container. Oh, really? I'm not sure what I'm doing, just ignore me. So that's a boolean. First we're going to check the container boolean again, so let's plug that one into a branch. And if it's from a container, then again first we need to call our RemoveItem from container. So let's grab the third person character, server RemoveItem from container, plug it in over here. So we can grab the contents and the index from the event. Oh really? There we go. And then we want to add them to the container again as well, because we're splitting the stack, so we're not actually removing it. And we need to make sure that we have a slot to add it to. So first we're going to grab all of the inventory slots for the world. And we're going to grab a for each loop with break. With break over here. Plug it in. And we need to make sure that we find an empty slot. So from here we're going to get an item row name and compare it. So is equal to, and if it's an empty slot, let's plug it into a branch. So if this one is true, then we can break the loop. So plug the true pin into the break pin over here. And that will actually keep the integer pin at the correct index. So then from the completed pin, we can grab our third person character again. And this time we're going to add an item to container. So server add item to container. So this goes into the completed pin. And then for the contents, we can actually grab those from the new stack contents over here. And for the inventory index, we can grab that from the array index over here. So we actually made sure that we have an empty slot in our inventory item menu in the update split stack function. So over here, all the way at the end, if we do not have an empty slot, we're actually disabling the button to split stacks. So we should find a slot in here that has a valid array index. So that's why we do not have to bother with the fact that we can loop through the entire array and maybe not find anything. So this should work. And then we need to do the lower branch. So in this case, we're removing it from the character inventory. So we're going to call a server RemoveItem from inventory and plug everything in. And again, we need to find an empty slot, and this time in the character inventory. So we can pretty much just copy all of this stuff, paste it over here. And we're going to replace the all item inventory world with the all item inventory player. And that should be good to go if we replace the last function with the add item to inventory one. So drag it from the character server add item to inventory. This goes into the completed bin, and then we're going to grab the contents from the event as well as the index. And we do not need to plug in a pickup because we're not picking up something from the world. So this should be good to go as well. So that should take care of the drop and the split buttons inside of the inventory menu. And now we need to go in the item menu and add the onClicked event over here. So let's go to the event graph. Switching my notes quickly. So over here, let's add an onClicked event for the split button. And then we can grab our player inventory widget and call the event we just created. So split item stack. Plug this one in, and we need to plug in the correct variables. So we're going to make an array for the stack contents. And we can make the structure. So the item row name is a variable in here. We can simply plug it in. And then for the amount, we can grab the input amount box again. So we can copy the stuff from the previous function that we created and just paste it over here. And we can actually copy this part as well. So we need the inventory index and the item boolean, world item boolean. So we can plug those in just like this. So we have an on-clicked event as well. So we can actually use the button. That's good to go. So now we can take a look at making a button to take everything from the container at once. So first let's open up our game mode, and in here we're going to create a new function that we can use to overwrite the entire contents of a container at once. So I want to prevent having to call a remove item from container in a for each loop and then maybe have a for each loop with 20 or 30 replicated events, while we can just do it with one event. So that's what we're going to set up over here. And first we need a function to make that happen. So we're going to call that save container info. Let's create a new function. Save container info, or better, save container contents probably. And for this we need one input, and that's a container blueprint. So let's call this BP container. And that's our BP container blueprint. So first of all, we need to make sure that this container exists and that we can find it. So we're going to grab all of our saved container actors and we're going to plug in the container from the input, and we want to save this inside of our function as a local variable. So we're going to promote it to a local variable, and that's the container world index. Local container world index, and we want to make sure that this is actually greater than or equal to 0. So let's do greater than or equal to and plug it into a branch. So if this is true, that the container is found and it actually exists. So then we're going to grab all of our saved container actors again, and we're going to set an array element. So we're simply going to overwrite something in here. For the index, we can grab the local variable and plug it in over here. So the item is the container from the event or function. So we can plug it in from the input over here. And we actually need it a few more times. So let's enable size to fit over here to make sure that it works. And then we're also going to grab all of our saved container actors info array, so the structure, and we're going to set an array element in here as well. So that's for the same index, so we can plug in the local variable again. And we need to make the structure, so let's drag off here and make a world info for the container. And then we can grab that from the container over here. So first we're going to get the container row name. And we can simply plug that one in. For the contents, we can also just grab it over here. So we already changed the contents and we only want to save them. So let's get the container contents, plug them in. And we can also just grab the transform. So get actor transform. And simply plug it in over here. So let's enable size to fit over here to make sure as well. And then all we need to do is call our update saved container actors. So that's over here somewhere. And that's on the game instance, obviously. So that's my bad. We need to grab the game instance, and from there we can call our update saved container actors, plug it in over here, and then simply plug in the array. And that should work. So that's the entire function that we need over here. And then we can simply return. Or not, that's good. So with that event in place, we're going to open up our container. So let's go to the BP container blueprint. And in here, we want to create a new event in the event graph. And we're going to use that event to remove all of the contents at once. So let's create a custom event and call this clear inventory contents. So this does not need an input. We're going to grab a for each loop and plug in our container contents. So that's the normal array over here. And then we simply want to set everything to 0 or an empty slot. So we're going to grab our container contents again and we're going to set an array element. Plug it in over here into the loop body. And then we want to pass on the index and simply make an inventory content structure and make this an empty slot. So that's empty with a 0. And we don't need size to fit, so that's good to go. After this is completed, we want to call our container contents changed event to make sure that everything updates if players are actually in this container. And then we can grab our game mode. So this always runs on the server, so we can simply get the game mode. And then we need to cast it to our third person game mode. And from here we can make sure that everything saves by calling our new event that we just created or function. And that's a save save container contents, sorry. And the container is a reference to ourself. So we can just plug in ourselves. Okay, so that should work as well. And then we need to go into our character to make sure that we can actually plug in an array into our add item to inventory function. So let's go into the character to add item to inventory and let's start at the beginning of the function. So over here, first we have a warning that we can't use arrays, and we're actually going to change that because we can use arrays for now. So we want to start off from the local content to add over here. So let's keep this node and let's move all of the other stuff a bit to the left for now. And let's just disconnect this and move it out of the way. Now the first thing we want to do is grab a for each loop, plug it in, and we're simply going to plug in the pickup contents from here. Then for the for each loop we want to check if this is not an empty item just to make sure. So we're going to break the contents and we're going to compare the empty row name. So is equal to an empty slot. Plug this one into a branch. There we go. So if this is false, we're not going to do anything. And if this is true, we're going to continue at the setter for the local contents to add. So that's where we made the room. We're going to plug that in over here. And then we can actually grab the array element for the for each loop and also plug that into the setter. So that goes into the local contents to add setter. That should be good, and the inventory index just comes from the input of the event, so that was already there. You can just keep that. So that's good to go, and then we need to go to the end of the function to make sure that we change some stuff over there as well. So let's just go all the way to the end. And over here we have the throw item, and then we check if this is from a pickup or not, and if we need to save the pickup, etc. So all the way at the end, we call our update newsfeed, and we actually want to call the update newsfeed for each loop body. So we need to make sure that we plug that one into the end of the loop body. So let's disconnect it over here, move it over here, and then we're going to grab the 2 pins that go into the isValid node and plug them into the update newsfeed. So this is going to be the new end of the loop body. And then we can grab all of this stuff and move it to the for each loop completed pin. So we can grab the return node as well. And we can go all the way over here. Oh, my mouse is freaking out. Really? Okay. So the completed pin for the for each loop, and we're going to plug in the isValid node for the BP pickup. And that should make everything work again. So the last node in here should be HUD update inventory grid, and then we can go to the return node. Okay, that's good to go. So compile and save it for now and go into the event graph. And we need to create a new replicated event in here to take everything. So let's create a custom event and we're going to call this server take all container items. Take all container items. And we're simply going to call the add item to inventory function. So we're already replicating it to the server, so we do not need to call the replicated event, just the normal function. And then we can grab the opened container from our variables and simply get all of the contents. So get the container contents and plug that one into the pickup contents. So there is no pickup, that's good to go. And for the inventory index, we're going to set -1. So it will look for an index to put those items in. And after we did this, then we're going to call the clear, how did we call it? Clear inventory contents on the container. So drag off the container and call clear inventory contents. So this will add all of the items to the player inventory, and then we're going to simply remove everything from the container. So we can compile and save it. We do need to make sure that we actually set this to run on server. So let's make it replicated, run on server. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So now we can compile and save. And then there's one thing left to do in the player inventory, and then we should be good to go. So let's open our player inventory widget. So first of all, we actually need a button. So we're going to add that to the vertical box for the container over here. So we have the border inventory world. Then we have a vertical box in there. We're simply going to copy and paste a button. So I'm going to grab the close button, copy it and paste it inside of that vertical box. So this is going to be the button take all. And let's change the text on the button. So let's call this take all. And then we can set it to align to the right. Oh, this is the text, I'm sorry. So we're going to set the text to align to center. And then we're going to grab the button. And this is set to fill. So we're just going to set it align right horizontally. And then do bottom vertically. And that should be good to go. So compile and save it. And then in the graph, we need to call the onClicked event or create the onClicked event. So button take all, create the onClicked, and then we can simply call take all container items, the event we just created on the character. So third person character, take all container items, plug it in over here, and this will take care of the rest. So if we did everything correctly, this should work and we can have a little look. So my first attempt failed and we need to take care of a few things. So first of all, let's open up our widget, our player inventory. So in the split item stack, I made a mistake over here for the inventory index, add item to inventory. I grabbed the inventory index from the event and we need to grab it from the for each loop with break. So we actually add it to an empty slot and not to the slot where it came from. So make sure that you switch this pin into the array index. Then in the player inventory as well, we're going to go to the create item menu, and over here all the way at the end in the previous video I forgot to disable the DPI skill. So if you have a window that's not full screen, you're not going to see the item menu, for example. So we want to set this to false. Let's compile and save that part. And then there's one thing inside of the third person character. We're going to go to the add item to inventory. And in here, we're checking for is empty. And we actually want to check is not empty. So we're going to change this into not equal. And then make this empty. And plug this one into the condition, and if this is true, then we can continue. So we could have swapped the pins, but whatever. So I deleted the save game because a few items got lost when this wasn't working. So we should have a fresh game over here. Let's make sure that the client has a save slot and that we have some stacks to play around with. So let's just pick up some stuff. So right now I'm the client, and let's go into the menu. So I'm going to create a stack over here. And let's say I'm going to drop this entire stack of 3 orbs. So let's drop it. And now make sure that if the server picks it up, it's actually 3 orbs. So we're going to pick it up, and we actually have 3 energy orbs added. So that's good. That should work. And they're actually in the inventory. So we can go right click and try to split 2 of the stack. So let's split them off. And now we have a stack of 1 and 2. So that's actually working as well. And we should be able to do the same things with containers. So for example, if we want to split a stack inside of a container, we can do that as well, and it will split them over here. Or we can drop an entire stack from a container, for example, and that should work. So let's make sure that if the client picks this up, again, it's actually 3 orbs. And according to the newsfeed, it is. And according to my inventory, it also is. So that's working. And now let's have a look at the take all button. So let's see what's in here. Yeah, that's fine. So we're going to grab both of the players in here and make sure that everything actually updates. So let's have the client take everything, and it actually disappears for both of the players. So that's good. And the client has all of the stuff. So I think we have everything working over here. And this looks good. So we're getting close to the basic setup, and I think we're going to start making this into a component. And after we have it as a component, we're going to add it to our multiplayer game, or you can add it to any other project or just keep this project. So whatever you prefer, you can still follow the tutorial. And once we have it into a more serious project, then we can start setting up some examples like using items and equipping an item, and maybe make a hotbar and stuff like that. So that's today's video. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.